Good afternoon. Engaging developers. How do we get the folks to go and write these applications, the services that were talked about this morning? I have before you a series of experts, people whose sometimes very lives depend on succeeding at that very task. Starting at the far end is Lindsay Frost-Cleary from the Gigabit Community Fund. She's been introduced earlier. Then we have Bradley Holt. Bradley Holt is with BTV, the Burlington Group, and let me get the right information here. He is a Code for America Brigade captain. He's also the co-author of Burlington's Gigabit Opportunity Report, which has been very instrumental in making things happen in Burlington. I'll note that in many of the cities where important things have happened in Kansas City and Burlington, there's been a report that people could point to that said, this is what we want to go do. And Aaron, you helped with that report in Kansas City. You're board chair at the Vermont Community Access Media, chair of the BTV Ignite Community Working Group, an author, speaker, and facilitator, a co-founder and technical director at Foundline, a creative studio that works with mission-driven and nonprofit organizations. Thank you very much for being with us today. Sitting next to Bradley, we have Andy Hyder. Andrew is a civic hacker, par excellence, I might say. We're in your home neighborhood right here. Indeed, thank you for coming down, talking to us, and being a friend of US Ignite. He is the developer relations engineer at Code for America, where he travels the world helping volunteers build useful technology for their cities. A 2013 Code for America fellow in Kansas City, he advised on open data legislation, helped organize a volunteer brigade, and developed BizFriend.ly to help small business owners adopt new technology. A trained urban planner who's built schoolyards, bicycle paths, neighborhood paths around the Bay Area, which I'm sure I've enjoyed from time to time. Thank you very much for those. And thank you very much for being here. And we have Aaron Deacon. Aaron is managing director of Casey Digital Drive, an organization that really came into being to take advantage of the gigabit capabilities in Kansas City. And as I said before, that bi-state initiative that you worked on and the report that you worked on that helped create that was really very important. He led the Give Us a Gig initiative to educate Kansas City communities about the possibilities of gigabit speed and service, and co-founder of the Gigabit City Summit. His professional background is in research and strategic planning. And of course, I have to say that if you're curious, you should check out Curio Lab, which is Aaron's discovery, creation, and application of insights needed for strategic decision making. You're president of the Social Media Club of Kansas City and has a master's in social science from the University of Chicago. So we have quite the panel here to go and talk about those issues. So let me start with Lindsay. Lindsay, you're working with the Mozilla Gigabit Community Fund. Could you tell us just a little bit about the Mozilla Gigabit Community Fund and how that's energizing your community?
Absolutely. So in Chattanooga, we're a few years into this gig adventure, and we got to a point as a community where we knew this had been a really exciting thing for Chattanooga, but we were having a hard time finding things to point to and say, oh, okay, that's how the gig impacts my everyday life and the lives of my children. So the idea behind the Gigabit Community Fund, both in Chattanooga and in Kansas City, was to fund the development of these applications in workforce development education that would be immediately applicable. So not, maybe it'll land in classrooms 5 years from now or 5 months from now, but in a 12-week pilot window, can we get this idea in a classroom, in a library, in an aquarium, get it in front of real-life learners, and see what happens? And hopefully by the end of all of this, we have some applications both in Kansas City and Chattanooga that we can point folks to if we do our job and tell the story really well. And they can then say, oh, okay, I get it. That's why the gig is important, not only for us, but for other communities.
And that's really important because having that interaction so that the people feel that they're being valued, I believe is a key aspect of what's happening.
And this whole effort has been really community-driven. I know a few of you, including Andrew, were at the launch event for the Gigabit Fund in Chattanooga, where there's a similar launch in Kansas City, where at the very beginning of this project, we got technologists, educators, community members in a room and said, okay, what are your problems, and how can we help you solve them using the gig? And that's really been the goal of this fund and our efforts broadly in building Hive networks in these cities, is to get those people talking, because I think a lot of times the educators sit over there and the technologists are over here, and we needed a common ground for them to meet and communicate.
Excellent. So Bradley, what caused you to think about starting a Code for America Brigade? How were you inspired? Did Andrew come and visit your door one day and knock on the door and say, would you please do it?
Well, there actually were a couple different angles that I came at it from, but one of the main areas was actually around the Gigabit advocacy, that Gigabit opportunity report that you mentioned. We actually had identified in that report a tactic of starting up a Code for America Brigade as being something that would be important for our community. At the time, my partner and I, who had co-authored that report, had said, well, this is great, we need a Code for America Brigade, we need one of these in our community, but somebody else can do it, we don't have time to organize it. And so we put that out there, kind of let that sit for a little bit, and eventually came to the conclusion that we should start it and get it off the ground. So, yeah.
That's important with Scout troops also. Everyone waits for another parent to go and take the lead and provide some of that leadership and organize. But if you want to see it happen, there's no better way to make it happen in the right way than to go and take some charge. Did you have trouble getting other folks to follow along and join?
No, we actually launched our brigade with the National Day of Civic Hacking last year. And we had about 50 people show up for that event. People were really enthusiastic about it, a lot of excitement, and we've been going strong ever since.
Great. Andy, could you tell us a little bit about that National Day of Civic Hacking? What is that about? And I think that Code for America is one of the organizations that helps sponsor that.
So the National Day of Civic Hacking happens every year, right around June 1st, that weekend. And we are one of the groups that helps throw it. And it is growing so fast and so large, and it's spreading across the country. Last time we had just over 100 cities participate. About 49 brigades helped organize these National Day of Civic Hackings in their own city, and then other passionate civic hackers did it in their city as well. The National Day of Civic Hacking is a call to anybody with any types of skills, from designers to developers to subject matter experts, to come together and use those skills to help improve their community, their city, with these new types of skills.
How many folks here have participated in the National Day of Civic Hacking? Okay, a good number. I'm glad to see that. For everybody who didn't raise their hand, Andrew, how can they know about this? How can they become informed? How can they participate?
Sure. So depending on where you live, there's most likely a Code for America Brigade in your city. You can go and find it on our website, codeforamerica.org/brigade. And this is just a group of people that care about their community and improving it using technology or whatever type of skills they have. And they're the best way to let you know of events happening in your city.
So that's one of the models for national engagement, Aaron. Can you tell us about some of the other models for national engagement besides Code for America and the National Day of Civic Hacking?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there are a handful. One of the things that's interesting, so we had Andrew as a Code for America fellow in Kansas City in 2013, which was awesome. Thank you again for coming. Right, and so now we've got the Mozilla Gigabit Community Fund in Kansas City. We have an emerging kind of healthcare initiative, and so you started to see sort of, I think, what I would characterize as the Code for America model between sort of, in their case, connecting government problems with civic tech. So they see technologists and you see problems and it's an inefficient system, and there's this idea that we need to connect these things, and they do this with a national scope, and they try to put this in different communities. I think, with Mozilla, there's the Gigabit Community Fund, and then there's the Hive Learning Network, which is sort of related and takes a similar approach from an educational standpoint. There are these sort of emerging digital education tools, and communities don't really have the capacity to figure out how to sort of identify the right ones and scale them on their own. So we're going to start doing this and expand nationally. What I've found over the past few years is that these different kinds of organizations have the same sort of need, they just differ by sector. And so what we've tried to do in Kansas City is to start pulling those things together, because when the Mozilla people need to go out and reach developers, or if Code for America needs to go out and reach developers, with City Camp, which is another, closely affiliated with National Day of Civic Hacking, but a different organizational model and different genesis, all the different hackathons. There was a group that started the Hack of the Sexes to engage women developers. Every time one of these things comes up, you kind of need to go out and reach the same people. So one of the things that we've tried to do with KC Digital Drive is start building that locus where you can, on the one hand, you've got these sort of national networks that are discipline specific and geographically broad. We want to create a hub locally where we can bring the disciplines together, but be locally specific.
One of the tools you have in Kansas City is Billion Bits. Can you tell us a little bit about the Billion Bits?
Yeah, this was, about a year and a half ago, when we were planning our first US Ignite hackathon, actually, we started thinking about how do we go out and get the developers that we need to do this kind of thing. So I asked a couple of the developer community builders in Kansas City, who I should talk to, who's working on Gigabit apps. They gave me a few names. I sat down and talked to people, and they said, I don't care about Gigabit apps. I don't want to, these were the top developers, mobile apps and some web developers. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And he's like, well, you can do everything that you need over the current internet. And it really kind of took me by surprise. I'm not a technology person. But I pressed him a little bit and kind of told him some of the things that I'd learned from Glenn and other people. And they were kind of like, oh, yeah, I guess you could do that. So it became clear that there was a real developer gap in thinking about gigabit networks. What became specifically clear is that software developers really are developing for the network that they have. That's how they're trained. That's what they need to do. And they don't really care that much about the network. They're building for the worst possible network environment that they may encounter. So starting to connect the software and network people was identified as a key need. One of the guys that I talked to said, we should start a conversation around this. What we really need is a 1 million cups for tech. And 1 million cups is a program that started about a year and a half, almost, 2 years ago by the Kauffman Foundation, which is just geared towards entrepreneurs. It's an hour on Wednesday mornings. 2 entrepreneurs come and have a 5-minute pitch about their business and 25 minutes of questions from the community. A couple hundred people show up each morning, and it's a great community builder for the entrepreneurial community. But we didn't have anything like that for the tech community, and so that was kind of the genesis behind 1 Billion Bits.
And you're leading that 1 Billion Bits effort, yes?
Yeah. So there's actually have recruited a guy named Ilya Tabak to sort of curate it. So my goal with 1 Billion Bits is to hold a conversation each week that I can't understand. Or each month, because there's just no place where the real high-level sort of technical conversation between why do you use this software framework versus another one is happening. So we've got a few program tracks. One is the proliferation of computing and algorithms. One is different software frameworks and approaches. And he kind of goes out, and we typically have somebody local who's working in this, and he'll often bring in a national voice. I mean, Glenn participated once by video. We had Stephen Wolfram last month. The guy, I can't remember his name, who invented the Jabber messaging technology. So some pretty interesting people, and Ilya's the guy who really curates the content for us.
So that's one good way to get a draw, is to go and have some outside experts come and talk and share their experiences. And another way is to go and make sure that folks have a chance to get together with other people like them so that they have that joy of doing it. That's partly behind some of the Hive ideas, isn't it, Lindsay?
Absolutely. So I've been talking to a couple of you about how difficult it is to sort of mandate technological innovation in education on a large scale. So it's hard for a superintendent to say you will use this Gigabit app in your classroom. But you can find the entrepreneurial teacher in one hallway in one school, and that awesome librarian who's really interested in web literacy and digital literacy. And the Hive provides a platform and a tool to get all of those entrepreneurs and those organizations together to learn and to sort of see what comes out of it. So in Chattanooga, we've connected informal educators, formal educators, along with technologists and designers and developers and just interested community members to really implement those innovations at a smaller scale within different organizations.
Do you liaise with other Hives? Is there?
We do. So that's the big draw. So we are particularly active in communicating with Kansas City. A lot of ideas are shared between those growing Hive learning communities, but we also work with the Hive learning networks, the more developed networks in New York, Chicago, Toronto, and Pittsburgh.
So I know that Chattanooga, where you're the leader for the Mozilla Gigabit Fund in Chattanooga, has a number of entrepreneurial and startup-oriented activities. Mm-hmm. There's CoLab, there's the Gig Tank activities, and others. how do you fit in? How do they fit in with Hive, and how does the Hive fit in with that ecosystem that already exists?
Absolutely. So we have found that those entrepreneurs are particularly eager to serve as advisors and facilitators and project managers for these educational projects we're developing through the Gigabit Fund. They have a lot of expertise to offer, whether it's helping our teams learn how to give better demos or giving some business advice. They've been great connectors. But also, we're a relatively small town in Chattanooga. You could go to a different tech meetup every night of the week. So our Code for America fellows have actually been incredibly helpful in helping us sort of connect these communities. They started a CHA-Dev IRC channel and a CHA-Dev calendar to put all of these events and opportunities out there for the public in a way that's really easy to see and understand, so that the madness is organized and there aren't 15 developer coffees or drinks on the same night every day of the week, you know? So it's been really helpful for us.
So one of the challenges is a challenge of size. And Bradley, you have maybe the smallest community. I'm not sure, but I think you might have the smallest community here to draw from. How do you make a viable connection when you've got a relatively smaller community to draw from and not so many people, but yet some passionate people?
So Burlington has a population of about 42,000. So I think we're probably we're the smallest Code for America brigade. And like I said, we're probably one of the smallest communities represented